Hello guys! In this lesson we are speaking about a very interesting grammar topic, which is the passive voice. To help you understand when exactly you need to use passive voice, let's look at two sentences. The drivers are installed automatically. This is the first sentence, and it is used in passive voice, as you can see here, passive voice. Another sentence, I install the drivers. This is the active voice. If you look carefully, you can see that in the second sentence, we have the subject, which is I. We have a person who does the action. I install. I do something. And in the passive sentence, there is nobody who does the action. You see that the drivers are installed, which means they don't do anything, but the action is done on them. So this is the main difference between passive voice and active voice. When you want to say that somebody does the action or something does the action, you use the active voice. And then you start with the doer of the action, and this person does something. I install the drivers. On the other hand, in passive voice, probably you don't know who does the action, or it is not important who does this action. That's why we don't need the doer, we don't need the subject, we just use the drivers are installed. So the action is done with the drivers. So looking at these examples, you can see that here we have passive voice used in present simple tense and in past simple tense. Actually, you can use passive voice in a lot of tenses and a lot of grammar constructions, but mostly we use passive voice with present simple and past simple. It is used in documentation a lot, and it is used in speaking a lot, especially in these two tenses. So let's look at them. The driver is installed automatically. This is present simple because you see the verb is here, right? You see is, and that's why you know that this is present simple. The driver isn't installed automatically. Again, you see isn't, which means that this is present simple negative form. And you can also form a question. Is the driver installed automatically? This is a question, and we start with is, present simple, and then installed automatically. How do we form this construction? How do we form passive voice? Well, you can see it here. To be plus verb with the ending ed, or if the verb is irregular, you go to the table of irregular verbs, and you have to take the third column from that table. So we use to be plus the verb. And the cool thing about passive voice is that the verb is always the same. It is used in the third form or with the ending ed. So you don't have to think about the verb all the time. It is like that in every sentence, in every tense. But what do you have to change is the verb to be. You have to change to be to the tense that you want to use. So if you use present simple, you say is or isn't. If it is singular, are or aren't. If it is plural, or am, if you're speaking about yourself. You can also use passive voice in past simple, right? So let's look at these examples. The new feature was added to the program. Again, you see was because this is what you change. To be changes into was in this sentence. So you get past simple passive. The negative sentence, the new feature wasn't added. In the question, what feature was added? So actually everything is very simple. You use the verb to be before the main verb. You change this verb to be into the corresponding tense, into the tense that you want, is, am, are, or was, were for past, and then you add a verb with the ed ending or in the third form. This is how you create passive voice. And let's look at the rules again. We use to be plus verb plus ed, or verb in the third form, when it is not known or not important who did the action, right? Because in this sentences, the driver is installed automatically. There is nobody who does this action, so we don't have a person who does this action. This is done by a computer, but this is not important. The important thing is that the driver is installed. It's not important who did it. The next one, we use am, is, are plus verb with ed or verb in the third form to make present passive, and we use was, were plus verb plus ed or verb in the third form to make past passive. So these examples are present passive, and these examples here are past passive, past simple passive. Okay, but sometimes, actually often, we can say things, sentences, either in passive or in active voice, because sometimes we can change, and it is not so important what voice you use, right? So we can often say things either in the passive or in the active voice. And let's look at these two examples here. These problems are solved by help desk, or help desk solves these problems. Actually, we say the same thing with both sentences. The first one is, as you can see, in the passive voice, because you have to be and then the verb with ed are solved. And then you have the active sentence, where you see that the subject of the sentence, the help desk, somebody who does the action, is on the first place. Help desk solves these problems. So help desk does something. And it's not so important which sentence you would choose to say, but the thing is that in passive voice, if you want to introduce the doer of the action, who did or who does the action, you have to use this word by, right? You say these problems are solved, and this is actually, it could be the end of the sentence, these problems are solved. But if you think that it's important to say by whom, right, then you say by and then who did the action, by help desk. So these sentences are actually telling the same thing, but in two variants. There is, though, a small difference between them. In the passive sentence, the stress is on these problems, and in the active one, the stress is on the help desk. So if the most important information is that help desk solves the problems, then probably you would choose the active sentence and you will put help desk at the beginning of the sentence. And if you mean that not other problems, but these problems are solved, then you put these problems at the beginning of the sentence and you emphasize, you stress this information. All right, and again, use by if you want to say who did the action at the end of the sentence. The driver is installed by a technician. The driver is installed. This is a passive sentence, but if you want to add who did it, you can say by somebody, for example, by a technician. We can also use passive voice in the future tense, future simple. It is formed very simply. So for future passive, use will be plus verb with the ending ed or verb in the third form. And we have an example here. The task will be done tomorrow. So you can see that this be transforms into the future, which is will be, and then you add the third form of the verb to do. And you have will be done. The task will be done tomorrow. So once again, you can use passive voice when you want to speak about the action and you don't know, or it is not important, who did this action. Maybe you don't have the person who does the action in the sentence. This is when you use the passive voice. Mostly it is used in present simple and past simple. You form it with the help of the verb to be, which is changed into am, is, are in the present simple, or was, were in the past simple. And you can use it in the future simple. In this case, you just add will, and you have will be for future. And no matter what tense you use, the main verb is always going to be with the ending ed, or if it's an irregular verb, you will use the third column, the third form of this verb. For example, present simple is the driver is installed automatically. You can see that this is, the verb is, shows that this is present simple. Or the new feature was added to the program. Here you have was, which means that this is past simple. Or the task will be done tomorrow. Here you can see that will be means that this is future, future passive. All right, so let's go to an exercise. In this exercise, you have to rewrite the active sentences into the passive sentences. So look at them, pause the video if you need some time to think, and then the passive sentence will appear under the active sentence. Let's go. Number 1. All right. The program wrote the data into a file is the active sentence, and the passive will be the data was written into a file. Remember that if you see the past simple tense in the active sentence, which is the word wrote, you have to use the past simple of the verb to be. And this is what we have. The data was written into a file. Number 2. The client approved the final version of the program, and the passive will be the final version of the program was approved. Again, we have past simple in the active sentence and past simple in the passive sentence, was approved. Number 3. In this sentence, you have to use the doer of the action. You have to mention who does the action or who will do the action. So you have to use the word by, and the answer is these issues will be solved by our support team. This is important that the issues will be solved by our support team, so we don't leave out the doer of the action, but introduce the support team with the word by. Number 4. The sentence is, as you can see, used in present simple, they add new features in Visual Studio regularly. So the passive voice should also be in present simple. New features are added into Visual Studio regularly. And number 5. So the answer is, a lot of bugs were found in the code by our testers. Alright, I hope you did the exercise well. Download the worksheet and do the exercises there. This is important because in order to use passive voice, you have to practice a lot doing exercises and changing active sentences into passive or passive sentences into active. It is very important to remember about the tenses and about the verb to be in passive sentences. So do the exercises and see you in the next lesson. Bye.